Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Banker Next Door. Let's get this show rolling. Hello, everyone. I am your host, Dr. Joe Berquist. Welcome to the Banker Next Door. I'm excited to be here this week. I'm we're sporting a little Eagles action here today, trying to give my team a little love and support today. Hopefully they'll do all right against the Cowboys tonight. We'll see. We'll have to see what happens with that. Today I wanted to bring a special episode. I have a lot of information on millionaires and billionaires that I wanted to basically share with everyone. I think everyone will find a lot of these statistics and information very interesting. I think, in the banking world or even the financial services world, you really have to study what's going on with wealthy individuals. How is their wealth growing or contracting? Is the number of millionaires growing? These numbers are very important as you try to determine, who your target audience is and who you're going after for various types of financial services products. In other words, insurance companies, insurance individuals, they might be targeting a specific makeup of customer. Wealth management people might be targeting one thing. Commercial lenders, commercial banking individuals might be targeting another. So with that in mind, I wanted to share. I'm going to bring this in here. So just a simple kind of rundown on millionaires and billionaires and what's going on with these individuals. So as of just about a year or so ago, there were 2,208 billionaires in the world. These billionaires had an average net worth of 4.1 billion. The U.S. has the most billionaires at 585, and New York has the highest number at 94. China has the second most at 430. And this is critical. I wanted to show this to everybody. So how do banks basically figure out, like, well, what is a truly like an uber wealthy person, and how do banks understand that? Well, they came up for a definition for that, and that definition of the ultra wealthy, in other words, a mega millionaire, is what's called an ultra high net worth individual, the UHNWI. And the definition for that is an individual or a family that has a net worth of at least $30 million. So the U.S. has approximately 79,595 individuals that meet that ultra high net worth definition. And here's an interesting thing. So these individuals are, for the most part, are very private, and it can be very difficult to contact. Not necessarily surprising there. I mean, if you're worth that much money, generally these people or these individuals and families, they like to keep a very low profile, contrary to probably a lot of the billionaires that you see out there. People like, obviously Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg. I would say for probably every, billionaire out there that is, high exposure, there's probably, another 100 that are, so low key that you would have basically almost no idea who they were. So again, just an interesting thing to point out. Hong Kong has the highest number of ultra high net worth individuals in the world. And so I'm going to introduce this statistic here in a second. And then as we go through some of the next information, we're going to see how this turns out. So as of 2019, there were approximately 11 million millionaires in the United States. That accounts for approximately 3% of the US population. So if you think about that for a minute, so the U.S. probably has, or at least as of a couple years ago, probably had an overall population of probably about 330 million for the, give or take. But you had 11 million of those were considered millionaires, which is a pretty significant number. Now let's move on here. So, and then again, just some interesting stats. So where do the wealthy go to school? Well, Harvard had the highest number of high net worth individuals at 1,906. University of Pennsylvania had 832. Columbia had 578. New York University had 488. Stanford had 466. Yale has 360. And then kind of rounding out the top 10 was like MIT, University of Chicago, Northwestern, Princeton, and Cornell. Obviously, a lot of Ivy League schools on that list, with Harvard, University of Pennsylvania, Princeton, Cornell, etc. So a couple interesting facts here. Your odds of becoming an ultra high net worth individual increase dramatically if you do graduate from an Ivy League school. Schools with the highest percentage of inherited wealth are Boston University at 14% and Columbia at 13%. The highest percentage of self-made were from the University of Virginia at 83% and the University of Chicago at 82%. So just again, just some interesting notes there, things to take heed. I don't know that anything there would be very surprising, but I did find it. I will say this: I did find it interesting that the schools with the highest percentage of inherited wealth came from Boston and Columbia. Those probably wouldn't, if I had to take a blank guess, those probably wouldn't have been the two schools that I would have jumped to mind. I probably would have gone right to like Harvard, Princeton, Yale, so on. Those probably would have been my first guesses. So now, the Federal Reserve does what they call the Survey of Consumer Finances. And this is a great survey that the Federal Reserve does basically every year, looking at examining the wealth of either an individual or families in the US. And so their recent survey just came out, and here's what they came up with. So about 16 million US families, roughly about 12%, have a net worth exceeding 1 million. And that's up from 9.8 million in 2019. So what we just said, as of 2019 number, we had basically, we had about 11 million. Now that has jumped up to 16 million US families that now have a net worth over $1 million. About 8 million US families are considered multimillionaires, meaning that their net worth exceeds 2 million, and that's up from 4.7 million in 2019. So you could see that the number of millionaires and multimillionaires has dramatically grown here in just the last 5 years. So only 1% of families under the age of 35 are millionaires, but that rises with age. So by the time an individual basically gets to the ages of 55 to 64, 21% are now millionaires. 45% of college graduates become millionaires between the ages of 55 and 64. And now we're going to take a look at kind of somewhat of a subgroup that they call mini millionaires. So here's some interesting facts on mini millionaires. So they basically earn between $150,000 and $250,000 a year. They are not considered rich, but rather upper middle class. The biggest wealth gains between 2019 and 2022 were among the approximately 13 million families in the 80th and 90th percentile. So in other words, roughly the top 20% of earners. 90% of these families own stock either directly or through retirement accounts. 87% of these families own their own homes. Many families got there by pursuing college degrees, steadily building retirement accounts, and purchasing homes. So and the reason why I'm saying all this is because you'll see here as we kind of move through here is like there's a pattern here. In other words, wealth is built over time. It's built slowly. People that are able to build wealth do a couple of key things. They focus on education, primarily through getting college degrees. They want to be homeowners. They want to purchase their own homes, and they're savers, meaning that they're putting money into their retirement accounts, 401ks, IRAs, and they're consistently doing that month in, month out, year in, year out, and they're steadily building wealth over time so that by the time they get to their mid 50s to early 60s, they have basically $1 million net worth. And like, again, and some of them get to a multi-million-dollar net worth. Now, and what we're going to do here in a minute is we're going to look at a specific example of the state of Pennsylvania in terms of the top income earners. And, I think that is, I just want to point out, I think it's very interesting. I think some people would say that, if you made $250,000 a year, that you were rich. And that could be true, but the 1% numbers don't really yield that out. And I think that really also depends on where you live. I think where you live plays into that a very great degree. So, okay, so let's take a look at what you called centi millionaires. So this is the population of the super wealthy, or those worth 100 million or more. And the number of these individuals that are worth $100 or more has more than doubled over the last 20 years. In particularly in the last 5 years, low interest rates fueled asset price growth, which led to a rapid expansion in the number of centennial-millionaires. Everything from real estate, land, stocks, private companies, and art saw boosted values because of this, because of, again, the low interest rate environment. Also because of the the COVID funding and other things that were out there. A lot of there's several factors to it, but the low interest rate environment is really what fueled this. And then the COVID funding just kind of jazzed it, gave it a turbo boost basically. So there are now approximately 20,000 plus so-called centimillionaires worldwide, and that's up 12% over the last year and more than twice the number in 2003. The number of billionaires increased from 500 in 2003 to 2,600 today. I had the stat at the very beginning that there were roughly about 2,200 billionaires, but you can see as of today, that number has now gone up to 2,600. Centimillionaires made their fortunes by starting their own companies or helping fund startups. The U.S. is still the dominant capital of entrepreneurship and centimillionaires, with 38% of the global population worth 100 million or more. So in other words, 38% of these centimillionaires, people worth 100 million or more, reside in the U.S. Okay, so let's take a look at countries with the most centimillionaires. So the U.S. has approximately 10,660. China has 2,358. Germany has 1,050, and India has 1,035. So basically the countries with the top number of centimillionaires: U.S., China, Germany, and India. Cities with the most centimillionaires. So New York had 775. San Francisco had 692. Los Angeles had 504. London has 388, and Beijing has 365. So with the end of ultra-low interest rates, the growth rate for centimillionaires is expected to slow, not necessarily, I think, surprisingly, with the interest rate environment going up, with COVID funding kind of drying up. So I think naturally that would have a tendency to slow down here in the next 10 years. However, the projected population of centimillionaires is projected to still grow by approximately 38% over the next decade, going from around 28,000 to around 29,000 by 2033. Centimillionaires are more representative of the world's super wealthy. And the dollar threshold for what it means to be a super wealthy has increased rapidly over time. And that's from a gentleman named Jurg Steffen, who's the CEO of Henley and Partners. And so basically in the late 1990s, if you had a net worth of $30 million, that was kind of the number to reach this status of this kind of centimillionaire group. Now that number is 100 million. So that number has grown dramatically in the last 30 years. Interestingly, there is often little visibility between a lifestyle between a person worth 100 million and a billionaire. I find that's kind of an interesting thing. So now let's take a look at kind of a little bit more in depth, a little bit more granular. So if you were living in Pennsylvania, what would be the cutoff for being the top 1% of earners? So in PA, that number would be 506,000 approximately. And that number is as of 2020. So if you wanted to be in the top 1% of earners in the state of Pennsylvania, you would have to make $506,000 per year. And approximately 60,147 tax filers in the state of Pennsylvania meet that threshold. In 2015, the cutoff for 1%ers in PA was approximately 447,000, meaning that level has increased by approximately 13% in the last 5 years. Nationally, if you were one of the top 1% of earners, you would be making 561,000, which is up 16.5% from 2015's cutoff of 482,000. So the cutoff for the top 25% of earners was 87,000 in 2020, which was an increase of 9% from 2015. Now, that number I find very fascinating, because if you made 87,000 in 2020, you were considered nationally in the top 25% of income earners. Um, $87,000 is not a huge amount of money. And I think I saw statistics the other day that said the average family in America, I think, makes like 41,000. So with the top 1%, if you're making 561,000 nationally, and your average family's making 41,000, obviously that's an enormous discrepancy there in terms of the amount of money that's being made. But let's stay focused on PA for the moment. So in PA, if you want to be a top 1%, you're making 506,000. So let's compare that to some of the neighbor states of PA. And so, because PA is kind of in the middle of the pack in terms of the states that it's surrounded by. So you've got, on the one side, you've got Delaware, Ohio, West Virginia, which PA is above that, but then they are far below New York, New Jersey, and Maryland. And again, just pointing out here that there's a big difference between the 1% and the 5% cutoff. So in Pennsylvania, the top 5% of earners have a cutoff of 213,000. Top 10% of earners have a cutoff of 150,000, and the top 25% have a cutoff of 90,000, which is not too far off, again, from the overall national averages. And I will say, I do have to put the caveat in there that these numbers are skewed by the billionaires at the top. I mean, the billionaires at the top have accumulated a lot of wealth, and that has kind of skewed these numbers a little bit. So it's not, again, it's not, I think you have to take, I don't know, how do you say it? Maybe take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. So they're not perfect, but they're not, tremendously far off either. So then let's see here, and then let's kind of wrap up. So basically the top 1% cutoff nationally. So in Washington, D.C., if you were to make the cut for the top 1%, you would be at 819,000. If you were in Connecticut, you were also at 819,000. And then the next couple states coming in below that are basically Massachusetts, California, New Jersey, the state of Washington, New York, and Colorado. Basically it's 600,000 plus. And then Florida and Illinois were just below the 600,000 cutoff, not far behind those other states. So the bottom states for the top 1% cutoff was West Virginia at 316,000, Mississippi at 328,000, and New Mexico at 353,000. Now, during COVID, you had kind of this mass migration of people moving from kind of northern states, particularly the Northeast, also Western states, California, Portland, Washington, and they moved to a lot of the southern states, in particularly Florida, Texas, North Carolina, and Arizona. And these were the states that attracted the most wealthy new residents. So just, again, some interesting information there. But going back, so again, I think you have to try to understand some of these numbers in terms of the wealth that's been accumulated, and how the wealthy, continue to grow at a pretty healthy clip here. I mean, we've seen a huge expansion in just the last 5 years, but even though things might slow down a little bit, those numbers are continue to get, larger and larger. You also have a dynamic where you have millennials and Gen Z are set to, I mean, they're going to inherit a tremendous amount of money from their baby boomer parents and grandparents coming up here, probably, I would say, estimate in probably the next 10 years. I mean, given the fact that, most of your boomers are probably in their late 60s and 70s at this point, you figure the next 10 years, they're going to be in their late 70s, and that probably, in that 78 to 88 range, where, again, most people would start to probably naturally pass away at that point. And of course, then you're going to see this wealth transfer that's going to come in, that's going to go in here, and that's also going to have an effect on some of these numbers. But understanding these numbers is very critical, depending on who it is you're trying to target from a sales perspective. In terms of, again, if you're a wealth manager, you're going to focus on some of these high net worth individuals and high net worth families, and trying to do this. I mean, pretty much all your big banks, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, They all have divisions and units that focus on these mega millionaires, these centimillionaires that are worth $100 million and more, and and so they all go after them and they all target them. So again, I just thought that a lot of these numbers were really interesting, and I just really wanted to share them with everybody, and I hope people find them interesting. If if anybody has any comments or whatever, please make sure to leave those below. And I would just say, if you like the video, if you like what you saw today, please give a big thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe as well. That always helps the channel. And I will be coming back next week. I have a couple more installments on the crypto series, which I'm gonna bring in, and then we have a banking update and some other things coming down the pike. A couple other interviews and things that are going to be coming here in the following weeks, and looking very forward to some of that. And but I hope everyone has an awesome day, and I hope to talk to you all again real soon. Thanks.